Hello guys and welcome back to another episode of my Ability System series. As most of you probably already know, I've been struggling with my motivation to keep creating these tutorials lately, but I've decided that I'll finish this series first and then I'll see what the future of this channel will look like. So let's jump right into it. In the last episode, we started working on the functionality of our skill tree. And in this episode we will wrap this up so that by the end of this video we'll have a completely functional skill tree in our little game demo here. To get started, let's go to our widgets folder, to the w_main, then head over to the event graph, and here in our onDrop event we will perform a little check for clearing the assigned spell. So we'll just see whether that from hotkey here is valid. And the reason we have to do that is because later, when we want to drag skills from our skill tree onto our hotkeys, we will use the same drag and drop operation, but we will just leave that from hotkey empty because we're dragging from the skill tree. And then we obviously don't want to clear the assigned spell of an invalid from hotkey. So only if our from hotkey is valid, we will clear the assigned spell there. Compile, save, and already close the main widget. Now we want to go to our skill tree component in Blueprints, Components, BPC Skill Tree, and we want to add a couple of variables and events that will be implemented later. Let's start off with the variables. First we need one called tree widget, and this will be a tree w_main tree reference. Next one will be a boolean called tree set up ? As I said, this will be a boolean. Then there will be another boolean called tree shown, so just whether it's visible currently or not. Next variable will be called upgraded spell, which we will use somewhat like a local variable for our event here. And the type here will be master skill reference. And the last variable will be the entry widget, which will also be something like a local variable, but just for the entry widget. So let's have a look. Should be called something like w_skill tree entry. Make that a reference. And that's it for our variables. Then we'll add a custom event here, which we will call setup tree. And we will copy paste this event, hit F2 to rename it, and this will be handle show command. So this event here is responsible for toggling the visibility of our skill tree, and we can already implement that. So first off, before we do anything, let's check whether our tree was set up before, otherwise we won't do anything. So look for a branch, and only if tree setup is true we will proceed. And now we have to execute different functionality based on whether we are already showing the tree or not. So let's get our tree shown and look for an if statement or a branch. Connect that to the true of the first one. If tree shown is false, means our skill tree is hidden right now. Then we will get the tree widget here and obviously show it. So set visibility to self hit test invisible. Afterwards we want to get the player character, get the player controller or player conref, and set input mode, game and UI. The mouse lock mode should be do not lock, and we will uncheck hide cursor during capture. Then the in widget to focus is supposed to be a tree widget, so just connect that up here. And after we did that, we want to set our tree shown to true, so that the next time this event is called we will hide it instead. Now for the true path of a branch, we can just copy our set visibility node and paste that, but this time we want to set it to hidden, and afterwards set tree shown to false. Alright, compile, save, and that's everything we can do in our BPC skill tree right now. So let's close it. We will come back to it later. Instead, let's go to our skill character now. Just select him in the level and open Blueprint Editor. Because here in our player tree we didn't add the categories yet, so let's do that. I will add 3 elements. The first subtree will be called skills, second one defense, and the third one buffs. I will just fill out the content for our first element, but just to show you that the other two also work, you can implement those if you want. It's really easy. And for our first one, we'll expand the content and add 3 skills. By the way, if you select the spell class here and you're not seeing all of the spells, what you have to do is go to your spell classes, so blueprints, skill actors, and these Flame Nova, Focus of Mind, and Arcane Ball are not shown there. So let's open those 3 and just compile, save them once. After that you should be able to see those. So in here, categories, first element, content, skills, first element again, and now we've got all of our skills here. So let's select the Arcane Ball, and the position here will just be 184 in X and 16 in Y. That's just some values I experimented with that work well, so feel free to change those if you want. Second one will be our Flame Nova, and the X value will be 184 again, but we'll put that down in Y by 204 pixel, and do not forget to select the Flame Nova. Then the last element will be the Focus of Mind, so the buff we created recently, and its X position will be 20 and let's say 424 in Y. Right? That's it for our skills. You can collapse them if you want. And we also need a connection, because we will set it up so that if you skill the Arcane Ball, you're able to skill the Flame Nova. So we need a connection there to indicate that. Let's add one element here. Position will be 240 in X and 113 in Y. Size I'll set to 3 in X and 110 in Y. Transform I will leave empty, and the fourth spell will be the Arcane Ball. Alright, compile, save. Then in our event graph here, after we add everything to the viewport, so at the very end, I'll get the player tree and call setup tree, and hook that up here. And if you have a look in our event graph, we've got the num plus to modify our health. That was used to test it. We do not longer need to test it because we know it's working. Instead, let's get our player tree and add some skill points when pressing the num plus, and just set the amount to 2 or something. Compile and save. Then close the skill character for now, and also our spell classes. Let's go to Edit, Project Settings, to Input, and we will add one action mapping that we will call something like toggle skill tree. And now you can choose the key that you want to use for this. I think most commonly the K key is used, so we will do that. Let's have a look. Keyboard K. Right, close it. And now we also need to implement that in our controller. So blueprints, skill player controller, search for some empty space and look for toggle skill tree. And the only thing that needs to do is getting our control char, then the skill tree or player tree, and then we need to call handle show command. Compile, save. That's it for the skill player controller. Now let's go to our widgets and the main tree, because for this one we didn't create the functions and events in the last episode. First off, let's select our close button, add an on-clicked event, expand our components, grab the skill tree, and just search for handle show command. Because we know that we can only hit our close button if the skill tree is visible currently, calling the handle show command function means closing it. Then we need a function here called update sp for skill points. We will get our sp text, set text, And to get our skill points, we get our skill tree, then get the skill points variable here, convert that to a text, int, expand it, uncheck use grouping, collapse it, and plug in the return value for the int text. Afterwards we can return if we want. Compile, save. I'll select the update SP function and hit Ctrl W to duplicate that and replace the SP with level. Then we'll get the level text and hook that up instead. Remove the SP text as a target because we don't want to set both text. And instead of getting our skill points from the skill tree, we will get the player of the skill tree, so the character here, then get the level and plug that in for the value, remove the skill points. Now we need to generate all of our subtrees and categories in our main tree. So create a function called generate categories. And what we will do here is getting our categories box, clear that. Getting our subtree switcher and also clear children. Then we will get all of our category widgets right now and clear those. And do the same thing for all of our subtree widgets. And now we can start to generate them. To do that, let's just get our tree categories array and run it for each loop. And for all of the categories we have, we will first break our array element. And then we will first create the category widget. So create widget, select the W underscore tree category, connect the name, main tree ref will be self, and the index will come from our array index. Then hook that up to the loop body. And we want to store that as a variable, so grab our category widgets array and add the return value to that array. Then get our categories box and add child to it. And that child will also be the return value. So that's it for creating the category. Now we need to create the subtree, so create widget again. This time select W underscore subtree, content will come from a break node, main tree, again reference to self. And same as with our categories, we will first add that to an array, so the subtree widgets, add, connect the return value, and then instead of adding it to the categories box, we will add it to the subtree switcher. Add child, and hook up the return value here. Right? Compile, save, and we can close our three functions. In our event graph, we will add a custom event called Initialize. We want to give that an input because it will be called from within our skill tree component, and we need to pass on that variable. So this will be a BPC skill tree reference called assign tree. And what we want to do first is setting our own variable here, skill tree, to that assign tree. Then we want to set our tree categories to the categories of that skill tree. Afterwards, update both our skill points and the level. Then generate the categories. And we will also select the first of our categories by default. So we'll just call onCategoryClicked, and index will be 0. Let's move that down and deal with our onCategoryClicked event now. The first thing we need to check is that our index unequals the currently selected index, otherwise we don't have to do anything. So add a branch. If that is true, we want to add a second branch, so just copy paste it, and this will be that the currently selected index equals -1, because that's the default value if I have a look at it. And plug that in as the condition, connect it to the true of the first branch. If this is true, that means we are changing our category for the first time, and that means we have to show our subtree switcher then. But let's do the false path. first. So if it's not -1, we want to get our category widgets, get it at the currently selected index, so our current element that's highlighted, and we want to call change state. Selected will be false now because we selected something else, obviously. After that, we can set our currently selected index to the new index from our input. Then copy our category widgets get and currently selected index and also the change state node. This time we will check it. And the last thing we need to do is show the tree in our switcher, so subtree switcher, and set active index to our currently selected index, right? Now for the true path, the only thing we need to do is getting our subtree switcher, set visibility to self hit test, and afterwards we can set our currently selected index. Because there was nothing selected before, it does not make sense to change the state of the widget that was selected before. Compile and save. Close our main tree. Let's go into our skill tree entry now, because we need to set that up for drag and drop, so we can drag skills from our skill tree onto our hotkeys. To do that, let's override a function called onMouseButtonDown, and the condition that has to be met in order to be able to drag that spell is that we have learned it first. So drag in the spell learned, search for an if statement. Only if it's true, we want to call detect drag if pressed. Pointer event will be the mouse event, drag key left mouse button, unless you want to use something else. Plug in the return value and connect that. Then override a second function called onDragDetected. And we don't want to be able to drag our skill if that's already on a hotkey, so we don't have duplicates of it. In order to check that, let's get our subtree, main tree, then the skill tree of that, and afterwards call the function skillOnHotkey for our skill actor, and add a branch for the out. If that's true, we can't do anything, so we'll just return with null. But if it's false, we are able to drag that spell, and therefore we first need to create a widget to represent it. So create widget, and we already created one before called skill drag, w_skill drag. Let's figure out the skill texture. So let's get our skill actor, get the current stage, break that, and we only want to see the override icon. Let's check whether that is valid and use the function, not the macro, because we want to use a select node now, and plug in that return value for the skill texture. If it is valid, we can use our override icon, and if not, off of our skill actor, get the info, break that, and get the default icon, right? So we created our visual representation of our drag. Then we can create the actual drag and drop operation. And we already created that class, skill drag. As I said before, we will leave the from hotkey empty. Skill actor will be our skill actor reference here. Default drag visual is the skill drag widget we created. Pivot point will be mouse down. And after that we can paste our return node, connect the return value, hook everything up, compile and save that. Now one issue is that in the drop event of our skill hotkey, we execute functionality of our from hotkey, which is now invalid, so we need to fix that. Close our skill tree entry, go to our w_skill hotkey, to the graph, to the onDrop event, and here when we check whether the assigned spell is valid, first if it's not valid, you will see that we are using the from hotkey here. So let's drag that aside and add some space, because we have to check whether that from hotkey is valid. If it is, we can just clear the assigned spell and proceed. If not, we need to skip that clear assign function and directly go to the assigned spell. So just hook that up here, Now here, when we check for the on cooldown, if that is false, we clear the assigned spell here. And right here, we are using the from hotkey again. So let's check for is valid. And connect that after the first clear assigned spell node. If it's valid, we will proceed like we did before. If it is not valid, though, we can copy our assigned spell node here, the first one of the two, that's important. Connect that to the is not valid and hook up the skill actor here to the spell. And then we'll directly go to the reset style node and skip the first clear assigned spell here and the second assigned spell here, because both of that functions are executed on our from hotkey, which is not valid. Okay, compile and save. Now we can come back to our skill tree component, blueprints, components, BPC skill tree, and add all of the missing functionality here. So first off, let's create a function here called activate connections. This will have one input and it will be asking for the spell that it is looking for spell. Variable type here will be a master skill class, which we will promote to a local variable called local spell. Now we need to cycle through all of the connections in all of our subtrees and check whether that connection specifically was created for the spell here, and if so, we need to activate that connection. To do that, let's get our tree widget, get the subtrees or subtree widgets, run for each loop, and inside that for each loop we will run another one for all of the connections of the array element. So look for connections, add a second for each loop, and here we have all of our connections as the array element now, which means we can just get the for spell and compare it to our local spell. So check if that is equal. If so, we can just grab our array element and call activate. Right? Connect that to the true. And that's it for this function. We need another one called update all entries. What this will do is very similar. We'll get our tree widget, get the subtrees, run for each loop, and inside that for each loop we will get the skill entries, run a second for each loop inside, connect that to the loop body of the first one, and in our second one get the array element called update upgrade box. Okay, compile and save. With that two functions created, we can modify our add skill points functions, because currently we are just setting a value here. After we set that value, we want to update all of our entries, because it's possible that now we've got enough skill points in order to buy one of the spells, and we need to get our tree widget and update the SP. Right? And we can close our functions and let's go to our events. Let's do the setup tree first. So when that is called, we will set the tree widget, and it will be the player characters main widgets skill tree. Hook that up. After that we can call initialize for that tree widget, assign tree being ourself, and then we'll just set tree setup to true. Otherwise you won't be able to show or hide it after that. Okay, then let's go to our upgrade and downgrade spell events. Those are a little bit more complex. Let's start with downgrade because that's simpler. First off, we wanted to promote our two inputs here, two variables. So first off, let's set the upgraded spell to the skill actor, even though it's a downgrade function, but it doesn't matter. Then set the entry widget to the input entry widget. And in order to downgrade a spell, the only thing you really have to do is get the upgraded spell and set the current stage index, then get the current stage index and subtract 1. So minus integer 1 and hook that up here, connect it. So that drives all of the logic for lowering the stage, where we also have to update our entries now and so on. So let's get our entry widget, update the stage text, and we will also update the icon in order that's changed now. Also, we want to add 1 skill point then, so we can spend that on other skills, and update all entries afterwards. Alright, pretty simple. Let's do our upgrade spell now. Same as before, we will set the upgraded spell to the skill actor and the entry widget to our entry widget before we do anything. For our upgraded spell, let's check whether the player can upgrade spell. And only if that's true, we'll proceed. First off, we want to subtract 1 skill point, so we will set skill points to skill points minus 1. Then get the upgraded spell and set current stage index to the current stage index plus 1. Basically, we're doing the reverse thing to what we did before. Okay, let's check whether our stage index now equals 0. This means we reached the first stage of it and learned it basically. If that's true, we can get a player character, get the learned spell classes, and add an element to that. The element being our upgraded spells class. So connect that. Then get our entry widget and call onSpellLearned. Here it is. After we did that, we can check for possible connections. So activate connections. And it's asking for a class, so just connect that up. Then copy over our entry widget, and we want to update both the stage text and the icon. After we did both of those things, get the tree widget and update our skill points. If you're wondering why we're not calling this function in the downgrade event, that's because we are calling add skill points, and in add skill points we are calling the update SP. And after we updated the SP, let's update all entries. Okay. Now what do we have to do if our current stage index is not 0? Well, we do everything except for adding that spell class, calling onSpellLearned, and activating connections. So we will skip those 3 functions and go to our update stage text call directly, and maybe add a reroute node here. Okay, I'll save this. Last thing we need to do is going to our player character, to the increase level function, and right here after we added 1 skill point, we'll get our main widget skill tree and update the level, and then we will get our player tree and update all of the entries, then compile, save, and we should be ready to test our system. Alright, so let's hit play here. Okay, we're not seeing anything right now. Level 1, we've got no skills. If we hit K, there is our skill tree. It reads level 1 SP2. We can close it, reopen it, either by hitting that button or hitting K. We are also able to spend our skill points on any of our 3 skills here. The position here is defined by what we entered in the categories of our skill tree component. We can also change the category to defense, but that's empty, and the buffs are also empty. Now if we skill our arcane ball, it reads 1 of 1. There was a connection to the arcane nova. We can drag that onto our hotkey, drag the Arcane Nova onto a hotkey. And we can use those spells now, so let's kill one of those spiders. Maybe a second one, just so we reach a level up. If I hit K now, I've got another skill point that I can spend on Focus of Mind, for example, drag that onto F8, close it, and if I hit F8 now, I can use that spell. One thing I forgot to do is in our skill Flame Nova, we want to add a required skill. And this is supposed to be the Arcane Ball. And then let's go to our skill Focus of Mind. And for our first stage, let's add a required level of 2. Okay. If we start our game now and hit K, there's only one skill we are able to learn, and that is our Arcane Ball. If we skill that one, you'll see that the connection to the Flame Nova is now shown, and we're able to spend a skill point on that. Now we've got those two, and because we're not level 2 yet, we're not able to skill our Focus of Mind. So let's kill both spiders again. And that's filling up. Let's kill the second one. Now we've reached level 2, we've got a skill point, and we're able to skill Focus of Mind. Another thing I want to show you are multiple stages. Let's go to the Arcane Ball, and we'll just add a stage here, but we won't change anything. So let's hit play again. If we hit K, you're seeing it reads 0 of 2. We can skill it once. If we do that, we're able to skill Flame Nova and Arcane Ball. And now if we skill it a second time, after that, we should be able to downgrade our Arcane Ball. And yep, it's showing the minus key here. So if we hit that, we've got another skill point left, but the stage was reduced by 1. Alright, that's all of the features for our skill tree. I hope you liked this episode. Please leave your feedback in the comments section, and hopefully see you in the next episode.